So this is what my experimentation in YouTube. You can see my channel is there, which is Curious News. So, which I have launched during this pandemic with an effort to reach out to my students. I have recorded my videos for them so that they can learn and understand about research, about open source programming, about recent trends in Industry 4.0 with machine learning, doing it practically without, there are diverse people coming to XISS from various backgrounds. It's not that they're from computer science or something like that background. They can be from English literature, they can be from history, they can be from computer science, they can be from rocket science. So it matters because we actually welcome from all communities, from all runs of life, and then from all backgrounds, and we train them so that they become professionals with a difference. So that's why I have done these videos to reach them out, because I was not able to reach them out physically during the pandemic, and then there's the screencast videos, the tool-based videos, and there's kind of videos which I have shown you in my channel. I have uploaded it, which is Curious Neuron. So this is my experimentation, which I have uploaded for real-time use and evaluation by the users in XISS and outside XISS, right? So in this way, Education 4.0 will bring a radical change in teaching and learning process. In this interdisciplinary approach, we will be of, your approach will be of supreme importance, how you approach it, how you look towards it, how you think about it. And Education 4.0 will surely, in that case, upscale your ability, as I have shown you right now. How far you will get enriched in learning the entire editing process, entire recording process, entire mixing process. So it's not only that you are becoming self-independent, you are becoming entrepreneurial in your journey while you are doing this. So don't restrict yourself to be a professional, to be a teacher, to be a student, or whatsoever. You do not know what seamless abilities and possibilities you are having. You can explore that with the help of Education 4.0, and it is going to sharpen your significant tools like creativity, originality, and will embrace and welcome the future. Thank you very much. Thank you for your patient listening.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an informative session. We have some participants who have put forward some questions, which I request you to acknowledge. I request participants, if they have any queries, please unmute yourself and put your queries forward.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
This is Anjit. I have been working as an assistant professor at the Singer Institute of Management.
Great.
I have a questions pertaining to your unlearning to self-learning acclimatizing. Sir, a couple of years ago, The Guardian, a British daily newspaper, published a news report which stated that 4 neuromyths are still prevalent in schools, such as students learn better if they are taught in a way that matches their preferred style of learning, whether visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. And one again, then people say also that we use only 10% of our brain, and again say difference between the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere results in individual differences. So the question is, sir, what things we have to unlearn for learning something new, and what are the ways to know about unlearning things? Okay, these are the things we have to unlearn at this time, and we have to go for the new learning, sir.
Exactly. Thank you for the query, and a very pertinent question in this context, which I would like to address in a way like, see, one is that how much we are really able to retain. That is a very important question, which relates to your left hemisphere, right hemisphere of the brain, and stuff like that. Now, the point is, if you have a closer look to the offerings of this EdTech or Education 4.0, the videos especially, you will find none of the videos are greater than 8 to 10 minutes, right? So it has been immensely researched and found out that a human will be able to be attentive to a particular kind of a continuous lecture up to max 3 to 5 minutes. On top of that, I have added 8 to 10 minutes, right? Now, you need to do intelligent segmentations of your lectures so that you can reach out to your stakeholder. If you are thinking that you will be, I mean, not you, every one of us are thinking that you will be doing the same copy pasting thing as we used to do in our offline lecture and just present it in an online mode, it is not going to happen. For example, I'm giving you a simple example. You may use any copyright material in the class and then just close the projector and you are through. But in online, if I can do an offline recording of your lecture, you will be in serious trouble. So we need to be very careful in reaching out to our audience, in segmenting our lectures, keeping in mind how far an audience can retain and how far an audience can reproduce. Based on that, intelligently we have to design it and we have to disseminate it, so that is what I said, that proper synchronization, proper editing, and proper dissecting your entire lecture into this platform is the art and the skill and the innovation we need to learn. So what we are unlearning here, our conventional process of thinking, our conventional process of teaching, our conventional process of delivering and imparting knowledge. So exactly we need to prioritize that what we actually want to address, what is our priority. Based on that, we ourselves need to think of unlearning and to fix the unlearning. That is why I said self-learning is the most important aspect of Education 4.0. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Any other question, please? Anybody else? Okay. Dr.
I have
Okay, fine. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, sir. I am Professor Mangesh Sanap from Siagat Institute of Management.
Good afternoon, sir.
Over a period of time, 5 years from now, online teaching would settle as one of the prominent modes of education. What prospects you see that technology replacing a teacher in future?
Yeah, thank you for the query. Now, the thing is that a teacher or a technology, these are two different terms in this context. A technology can be a tool, but a teacher is something who is not just a tool, but a facilitator. So probably if we are addressing the facilitator as a teacher, then we are restricting the scope of that particular individual. So we need to understand what is the duty of a facilitator. So a facilitator who is there can never be restricted by a tool or a technology. One technology will come and optimization should be always there. So that facilitator will look after that particular optimization. It is not always in terms of technology that how will I do certain kinds of coding or certain kinds of technical things to make it more and more optimized and available, but also in terms of outreach, in terms of collaboration, in terms of research, in terms of innovation. So there are so many ways how a teacher can actually, or a facilitator can actually act even in the presence of the technology the way they are doing now. So it is not really a hardcore reality that teachers will be replaced by technology, but true, if we are not updating ourselves, making ourselves ready for Education 4.0, we will be irrelevant. Not replaceable, but irrelevant. So that is true for anybody. Even a doctor is not practicing, the doctor will be irrelevant. Even a film star is not practicing making his physique or something like that, the person will be irrelevant. So similarly, we have to buckle up and we really have to be ready for the upcoming times. It is very exciting, trust me. And if we really do that, we become self-independent entrepreneur in ourselves, each one of you. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Rick, since you are in the research, training, learning and development zone as well as the zone of innovation, so just wanted to understand that you have been doing a lot of, online sessions, right?
Yeah, I mean webinars and all, yes, and also in YouTube and also in certain invited sessions, right?
Yeah. So just wanted to understand that do you also segment the student group, like if you are doing content classification, so are you on the other side doing a student classification or student segmentation, or what level of, to what extent do you help students personalize on their learning experiences? Do you because you are a very esteemed researcher also, so your viewpoint, if you have carried out any, or if you have a know-how from the other researches being conducted, that personalization on the online platform for the online courses of students, personalization of students. So I would like to know to what degree it has to be incorporated and what is the outcome from that?
Okay, so there are two ways of looking at it. One is, as we understand, that one is that from the facilitator's perspective, another is that from the student's perspective. Now, from the facilitator's perspective, if you want to look at it, if we have a close observation of the different courses which are offered by the different EdTech organizations or the IITs or whoever, we will find that for everything there is a foundation course. That is point number one. Second is that for every course, you will find that what is the prerequisite for this course.
Correct.
So, since this particular course is, I mean, any online course for that matter, the learner is matured enough to understand that I need to go through the documentation before I join a course because I'm investing whatever, even $400, but that costs. So I will go through that particular, prerequisites and try and find out that what exactly is there. And then I will move ahead for it. Second is that you will find that most of the educators in platforms, which is now, let's say, if I may take the name of Tata Consultancy Services, they have entirely bought the Udemy package entirely. Now, the thing is that here in Udemy, why I have named this, because of the fact in Udemy you will find, hardly you will find any professor delivering any lecture. They all are professionals who are delivering the lectures and creating the slides, and they will provide you only with the things you need to know and what you are supposed to know, but why it is not required, right? Now, on the contrary, if you go to Coursera, you will find Professor Andrew Ng, you will find Jeffrey Hinton and people like that, and they will be explaining the entire math and stuff like this behind a particular effect which you do. So then the automation comes at the student's level itself, and based on the requirement of the students, since the independence has been provided in contrast to conventional learning, that which platform shall I choose? Where shall I go? By having a test of the demo videos. All of them are providing. Udemy is providing you demo videos. Coursera is providing you auditing the course for 7 days. You can have entire course for free for 7 days. So now, this particular things, the independence as well from the service provider, from the students end, from the facilitators end, that is being provided to them, is actually, we need not really have to take any sort of effort. This is getting the process itself, the system itself is segmenting the students the learners in an automated way, that they will only join those courses which are relevant and pertinent and it at par to their IQ level. They will not join a course. That's why you will find there is so much disparity of same kind of courses which have been offered by several bodies. So there we need not have to worry much about the segmentation because that will be done automatically. Second is that if we are the providers, we need to provide it on a step-by-step basis, and we need to be very clear about the prerequisites that are required for a course. Yeah.
Okay. So you are saying that in this case, the students are being allocated the responsibility with regards to their choice. The offering is there. The entire plethora of courses in a platter across various segments, various disciplines are there, the modes are there, the content is there. It is the students' wish and the desire and the interest level to seek a course of his or her own choice and then do that course, right? That is
because it is student driven. The entire thing is student driven. That we have to understand. Earlier, the conventional system is teacher driven, but online platform is student driven. That is a well accepted fact. So this is how it is. Yeah.
Okay. In that case, the students who would like to, are ignorant of what to choose, how to choose, and need to be a little guided. So online learning platforms, do they I'm just asking you, do they offer such type of guidance to the students or the counseling which is being done? Yeah.
Correct. So as of now, I am not really aware these things are being given. Vis-a-vis, I would like to propose here one thing, right? That is, if you go to Elsevier, if you go to Springer, right, and really any provider like this, and you copy and paste your abstract, they will suggest you certain kind of journals, right? Journal finders there.
Correct.
Similarly, if this kind of a platform can be developed, where if I paste my need based on the basic needs, some kind of automated detection can be done. Obviously, it will relate to several courses, right? Content-based courses.
Correct.
Now, what will happen is that, as you can see these days, Google Lens is there, which without typing, you like a cap, let's say, in the road, and you take a picture, and it will connect you to the several providers and what is the cost of it. So similar kind of effort can be taken in case of online. So for reluctant students who are, because people are getting more and more lazy these days, as everything is being, offered in a pocket.
It is
So that is why what happens, if they can really have that kind of a platform there where they can just type in their query and things can be, again, recommended to them. But there is a problem, right? What is the problem? The problem depends on the efficiency of the search engine optimization of that particular service provider. So because the more it is coming to popularity with the help of the keyword matrix of that particular website, the more popular it becomes. The more it you see it, the more it gets sold. So that is one problem, that the maximum hit it is getting. So we need to be very careful in devising the attributes that based on what you will be recommended a certain kind of a solution. Yeah.
Correct. So do you think that before a student takes up a course, okay, so whether there should be an assessment of the student as to his capability, his choice, his interest before the course being offered? Do you think that and see, designing, building and implementing is one aspect. Whether there will be takers for this type of a platform, where the platform says, okay, that you register, you say that these are the courses you wish to take, we would go in for a small assessment of yours, okay, and then we will, as per your capability, interest, about also the foundations, whether they have been done or not, based on the prerequisites and all, we will be giving you certain choices, out of which, based on the cost or time or whatever, like again personalization, you can choose. So are there any platforms who are, I think so, platforms might be doing such type of
no. I mean, in fact, even SIOM even doesn't do that. So what is the reason is, the reason behind this, then we are actually hitting the very basic idea of providing freedom through online education and making it student driven. Again, we are having a monopoly of the faculty that I will be grading you and I will be recommending you. But then in this system, the system questions us, who are you to choose it for others? I will find myself, I will evolve in myself, and I will adopt myself. So don't come in my path. So if we are really doing that, we will be restricting the very basic idea of education 4.0, for which an open mind is required to embrace industry 4.0. So that is why probably it is not being done.
Okay, or else there can be a choice. I mean, we suggest for you, or you are open to that, isn't it?
I mean, that is an open choice. You can join either ways, but you cannot restrict. You can join either ways. That's how it is.
Fine. So a guided system and a total a system
and total independent system. Supervised and unsupervised one, both the system.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Thank you, madam.
Any other who wishes to ask? Because we could have got
Das, and I would like to ask you one question. While developing e-content or probably e-lectures, how do I understand whether I am not hindering any kind of a copyrighted material? Is there any platform wherein I can check whether the e-content which I have developed is not surpassing any kind of a copyright or any kind of, it is not plagiarized? How do I check that?
Now, there is a specific policy for this, right? Now, as we understand that we are having several open access documents these days available in the internet. Second is that we can even share a journal paper for this, right? Now, how we are getting the journal paper? As we all know, I am not naming the source, but then there is a particular engine or a tool or rather a website wherever if I type the DOI, I can download it, any paper free of cost, right? Now, the thing is that if I'm downloading it, and then I'm using it, whether I'm authorized to use this online or not, because what you upload online stays online. So in that case, you have to ensure that you have collected it from trusted sources which you can refer. Now, if you are sharing this for non-commercial purpose and you are referring it, then it is all right, right? And you are not sharing it for any commercial purpose. Second is that there is a license called Creative Commons license. These days, you find most of the open access, including Nature Journal, so they are under Creative Commons license. So if you are sharing it with proper citation, the entire text, there is no harm, right? Third is that there are n number of open access data sets. If you are sharing that, there is no harm. But then what is mostly required is proper citation. For that, we are having the tools like Google Scholar, like Mendeley. If we are going to that and creating proper citation, there is no harm doing that. But then if you are really doing it with the help of, let's say, something you share and then you don't acknowledge. For example, from a book, if you are sharing it and if you are saying that I am sharing it from a book, these slides are made from this PPT, from this particular book or this thing, this is all right. But then if you are not doing without proper citation, just like journal publication, then you are really in infringement of copyright. Yeah.
So many of the Elsevier's, SEM, they have their own strategy of even citation, their formats.
So it's not about Elsevier or ACM, it is about the different modes they follow. So there can be APA, Chicago, Cell, so plethora of these things are there. Like that we can do. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Any other?
Yes, ma'am. I want to ask one question.
Yeah.
Hello.
Please. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, tell me.
Sir, this is a good evening, sir. Professor Preeti Rajput from DY Patil University.
Yeah, good evening.
Sir, actually, I wanted to ask. We are now using the online platform for the teaching methodologies, for the teaching or anything else. So, awesome. For further creations, means if we are teaching something and some of students who are the mediocre, they won't understand some concept. But some of one who are good and they raise their hand, okay, we done it. But those are mediocre students, they won't understand. And in a actual teaching or in a conventional method of teaching, so probably we reach to each and every students. By checking their facial expressions or whatever else, or we can understand as a teacher ki, yes, these students is not getting me or what I wanted to express. So probably, is there any pedagogy that we can reach to that particular students, or is there methods we can follow while teaching any kind of contents or any kind of content delivery while teaching?
Yes. Now, two things I would say in this regard. First is that, as far as, DY Patil, I think it is offering several kinds of courses, isn't it? Even medical courses are there as well in DY Patil.
Yes, sir.
So, whenever we are trying to deal in an online or an offline segment, whatever it is, it should be in this scenario of Education 4.0 and Industry 4.0, the emphasis should be more on hands-on, one. Second is that while we are doing our hands-on, in the class we are having a limited timing. That is due to several reasons. Online, as I have said, retaining is a question. After that, online, while you are delivering, you may be using the Wi-Fi of your institute, but the student is using the Wi-Fi sitting at their residence, so they are having limited capacity and stuff like that. So there can be several reasons. So you are restricted to, let's say, 30 minutes, 40 minutes or stuff like that. While you are doing that, you are always in a pressure to finish it up. And the students who are good, they will be picking it up. The students who are not up to that standard may be taking a little bit more time. So for that, we need to reach out to them in a way so that 24 hours, whenever they are willing to do so in a mood, they are able to see that what their teacher is doing and saying. So that's why I have shown my particular experimentation with YouTube, that particular channel, Curious Neuron. So there, you need to take an extra effort and develop certain well-known videos where the pain points are. As a teacher, all of us understand that where will be the probable pain points. So we need to create those videos and upload it in our channel and ask them to go through it before coming to the next class. And even if they fail to understand something, they can go through it, they can take down the notes, they can reach out to you, or can write comments there so that you can again prepare a video and upload based on that. So that will actually help them to connect the dots and can get along the way, and you will see a huge improvement in them at par to your other students. As you address them in this way, they will also find the interest. So you have to take a wholesome interest in that so that students get involved more and more wherever they go. So being said this, I would like to also add a little bit more in this, that whenever you develop a YouTube video, you know where your students are available in WhatsApp, in Facebook, in LinkedIn. You just copy the link and say, my next upload, check it out. Everywhere you paste it, even in your WhatsApp status, you will find all the students out of curiosity will visit and will do one click. So first day they will do, second day, third day they will see at least for 3 minutes, at least for 2 minutes, and this will grow their interest and they will be in harmony. Yeah.
So the level of engagement differs.
Thank you so much, sir, for such an informative session. Thank you. I request participants, if they have any queries, drop your questions in WhatsApp group. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
So at this point, I would like to hand over the platform to my fellow co-anchor Ashi. Thank you all the participants.
Good evening, everyone. I'm back once again. I hope you all enjoyed and learned something or the other from these sessions. David Warlick quoted, "We need technology in every classroom and in every student and teacher's hands, because it's the pen and paper of our time." So, without wasting any time, I'll proceed to introduce our next guest, managing partner, Happy Marketer, a Merkle company, a part of Dentsu, entrepreneur and angel investor, regular columnist in Economic Times and Business Times, Mr. Prantik Majumdar. We welcome you, sir. Mr. Prantik is an entrepreneur and angel investor and acts as a digital transformation catalyst in organizations to drive sustainable change and impact. After pursuing a degree in computer engineering from National University of Singapore, he kick-started his career with the Singapore government to drive international trade promotion for the island state. He started his entrepreneur journey with Happy Marketers in 2011 and eventually had a successful exit when he sold the business to an American digital enterprise called Merkle, which is part of Dentsu, the largest Japanese advertising conglomerate. Apart from his corporate role, he is an active mentor and tech investor through Quest Ventures, TIE Singapore, HealthX Capital, and is entrepreneur in Reservoir at Inseed. Outside at work, he is an avid cricketer, enjoys political disclosure, and is intrigued by behavioral economics. Trust me, we're lucky to get to hear Sir as he talks about the digital edtech revolution is transforming the way India is learning and getting educated. I request you, sir, to begin the session.
Thank you so much. It's indeed a pleasure to be on this platform, and thank you to a lot of people who have kind of helped me kind of get here. Especially thank you, Dr. Mitali Talukdar, as well, for inviting me. So without further ado, I think I will just request if I could share my screen so that I can get my presentation. Is my presentation screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. So, what I've essentially done is, having given my experience in the digital consulting world, primarily in Southeast Asia and to some extent in India as well, we have worked with a lot of government bodies, a lot of edtech players, a lot of investors, and advise them on not just their digital marketing, but also how education as a domain can be digitized and scaled up globally, because education is one such domain which is, education is a foundational pillar of life. So I think it is, it is not just a business domain that one needs to look at it from, but also look at it from a perspective of how can we solve for a much larger purpose. So what I'll really focus on is 3 segments. I will talk about the current challenges of the domain of education, notwithstanding COVID, as well as how does potentially the new normal or the new world look like for the world of education. I'll also give you a quick overview of the education landscape, as well as the market size and potential opportunities. And then I'll kind of spend some time on how India as well as Southeast Asia is kind of shaping up its education domain. I think it's obviously a very, very exciting phase for India in the domain of education, as some of the previous speakers have spoken. And lastly, I'll end with 3 or 4 key trends that I expect the edtech space to kind of follow in the coming few months or years. Right. Let me begin with this. I don't know, this slide, the image on the left, it might have appeared in many of your LinkedIn feeds. I don't know if you have seen this, but this is a humorous one that kind of started, doing the rounds a couple of weeks ago. But I think it kind of highlights the challenge that the education domain is, facing today. So what you see here is education. So, if you look at all the brands, Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, Showtime, Disney, these are all OTT platforms, streaming platforms where probably most of us, stream entertaining content today. And globally, typically, these are the price points that one pays annually. Of course, India has far more competitive pricing. But interestingly, when this meme started doing the rounds on LinkedIn and other online channels, a reputed education body like Harvard started getting compared to these. And I think this is, whilst this is meant for humor, but I think this really points out where education stands today. Essentially today, with potentially at least for the next 6 months to 12 months, campus education not being possible in many parts of the world, including the US. Essentially, with education, coming online in the domain of Zoom or YouTube or WhatsApp, people are suddenly beginning to question, why should we pay this massive amount of money, $50,000, for example, for an education degree at Harvard, where it's only going to be streamed online? So suddenly the value or the perceived education is genuinely being not just questioned, but also being compared to other domains such as entertainment, where today sitting at home or on any particular island, you could be consuming unlimited reels of entertaining content throughout the year, but just pay $100. So suddenly, why should one pay, that high or steep a price for education? And I think as people in the domain of education, as people, who run universities, who are teachers, I think this is a great point to kind of pause and think about it. Because for a long time, for at least centuries, education, was pretty much in the realm of elitist organization. Education has been kind of been compared to luxury brands. So when you typically look at the marketing brochures of prestigious education brands, they typically talk about, 1 lakh students applied, but only 1% got access. So at one level, you want to increase the prestige of your of the educational institution, be it the IITs, IIMs, ISBs, or globally Harvard, Stanford, Yale. But the flip side of that, it also means that education is not democratized, it's not accessible, it's not affordable. So I think we're at a very interesting juncture where technology as well as COVID, they're accelerating this trend where it's kind of asking us to question that, hey, should education be only accessible to the rich and famous? Should it only be accessible to people who have the means and wherewithal? Or why should education not be accessible to everyone? Why can't this be accessible to a kid sitting in Satara or someone sitting in Afghanistan? So I think this is, I wanted to kind of frame my presentation with this broad question that, today COVID or situation is, making us realize this. But I think it's a very, very critical question that we all need to ask. That how and where what problem are we trying to solve as an industry? And, it's very, when you're talking about education and the change in education, you can't not talk about this gentleman who is a professor at NYU himself, Dr. Scott Galloway. He is a very harsh critic and an open voice talking about not just what's wrong in the domain of education, but also in many other industries. And here is a piece that I've picked from one of his recent articles where he says things won't change as much as they will accelerate. While other crises reshape the future, COVID-19 is just making the future happen faster. So he essentially really, points out what's currently primarily a challenge with the education system in the US, but I think it's reflective of the education system globally, including India, Southeast Asia, because the models are the same. So he points out, for example, look at the graph, which shows us that US education prices, the way it's grown in the last 20 years compared to inflation, nearly 3 times that of inflation, which is unbelievable. That it starts to make you wonder that, education, which is such a noble field, in India, of course, we have goddesses like Saraswati, obviously, compared to the domain of education. But if you start looking at it commercially, I think we have a challenge at hand. And if you dive deeper, not only has education grown 3x compared to inflation, if you compare it to other areas such as food and beverage, housing, healthcare, childcare, you look at the costs of textbooks and college tuition. You look at it's 2x of healthcare. Now, and healthcare is already very expensive. Childcare is already expensive. But clearly, education and private education is, the pricing of that has gone off the roofs. In fact, you look at textbook. In the last 40 years, the percentage change in textbook prices has gone up by a staggering 800%. And honestly, I didn't know this, till I started digging up and doing this research. And I think, even without COVID, this was bound for disruption. Because as we have seen in the last 20 years, technology is disrupting media, news, healthcare, and education is ripe for innovation and disruption because for the longest time, education, like I said, was in the hands of very few powerful people, the rich people, people who obviously wanted to make a massive business. Now, I have no issues or qualms against, education being a business. But as long as it's solving for a much larger population, as long as it's solving for efficiency and effectiveness. But unfortunately, in the last 20 years, that hasn't been the case. Because if the pricing of textbooks and college tuition has increased at that massive level, clearly we're not solving for affordability and accessibility. And then I think one of the reasons of this is, as I started diving deeper, is because suddenly, again, in the last 15, 20 years, public funding has drastically reduced in education. Again, it's beginning to come up, thankfully. But I think what's happened is, there was this cross juncture in about 10, 15 years ago where primarily education came into the private sector. And as we know, anything that comes purely in the domain of private sector, it is likely to become very, very expensive and likely to become, likely to kind of be in the hands of very few, and hence it wouldn't be, priced competitively. So this is one of the key reasons as to why education is, feeling the pinch and feeling the heat, and why technology and various tech startups, be it in India, China, or the US or Southeast Asia, they are beginning to realize that technology can be used for the good, for the larger population, and it can really help to solve a much larger problem at hand. And, a lot of people are talking about how COVID's impacting, but, the change had begun even pre-COVID. So on the left, you see an article from the Forbes where it talks about that the MBA degree is in a crisis. Some of the largest US and European schools had started seeing decline anywhere between 5 to 15% on an annual basis, because the MBA degree was created for a very different generation. Its perceived value was again meant for a very different generation, where someone has to take a 2-year break and spend $150,000, $200,000 for a degree. It becomes untenable, right? Where especially salaries and jobs post MBA degrees are just not as great as it used to be back in the US in 70s and 80s. India, of course, is slightly different. The perceived value of an MBA or a master's degree is still very high. But I can tell you from Singapore, for example, in a country like Singapore, unless you're from 1 or 2 or 3 of the top B schools, the paper degree does not matter at all. What matters is experience and your actual employability and your actual skills to solve problems. So I think we're in a very different era of pragmatism, where industry is saying, look, these degrees, unless they really solve for vocational skills or solve for employability, the premium for paper degrees, even from the likes of Wharton, is diminishing. At the same time, of course, post-COVID, obviously, as expected, most business schools, most colleges, not the US, are expecting massive drops in enrollment only because of the current crisis. And of course, in the US, just literally 2 days ago, up until 2 days ago, there was literally a huge legal battle going on between Harvard, Stanford, and the president, where potentially the whole student visa issue could have been at a huge challenge. So, we are at a massive flux. But the point I'm trying to make here is that COVID notwithstanding, education as an industry is very, very likely to go through a massive change because of the problems that I just highlighted. And there are a couple of other issues at play here. One is fundamentally we are moving from scarcity and information asymmetry to abundance. For the longest time, like I said, education was not accessible. And hence there was this massive class difference and information accessibility issue. But today, like some of the previous speakers talked about, information is accessible to anyone and everyone in various formats, in video, in audio, etc. With the mobile revolution that's taken place across emerging markets, information is available. Of course, what matters is how well structured is the information, the pedagogy, of course, the whole issue of certification. That matters as well. But at least what's amazing is today someone sitting in a village has, if they have the hunger and the desire, the information and the knowledge is available, right? And the other is the whole Britannica and Wikipedia issue is, for a longest time, the education curriculum and pedagogy could not keep pace. It's the classic issue of how your encyclopedias took, years to get updated. But in Wikipedia, just 4% of the user base is all that's required to get information updated, current and real. And scientists have compared the information, the accuracy of information on a Wikipedia or a Britannica. And I think about 87 to 90% of the information is accurate. And even if the information is not accurate, because of the digital platform that it exists on, it can quickly be corrected or edited. So I think, we are seeing these trends that digital technology has brought forward in the last 20 years. And I think it's benefiting education in a very rapid pace. And the current COVID scenario is only accelerating that phenomenon. And again, like I said, right, this has been going on for a while. So Salman Khan Academy literally began pursuing this path 15 years ago. He started using simple digital tools like Skype, etc. What started as an individual dream to kind of train his cousin across the American coast. Eventually, he started Khan Academy with fundings from Bill Gates and other people. And the goal was the same. Why can't we teach many more kids, many more people across the world, across different time zones in a very cost-effective, accessible manner? And today, of course, thanks to EdTech as a whole industry that's shaping up, this has become democratized and it's scaling up rapidly. And again, some interesting trends that I'm noticing that just in the last couple of months, platforms like MOOC platforms like Masterclass, which are offer, so people spoke about Coursera, Udemy, Udacity, etc. But suddenly you have, entertainment and education mixed platforms like Masterclass, which basically promises micro learning through celebrity teachers without any much guarantees. They are gaining a lot of traction. So again, Scott Galloway, this research, the slide on the right, where if you look at Google search, so Google search volume is a good proxy to understand inherent demand. And if you notice, then in the last year or so, the search for Masterclass has had a surge of about 3,000%, whilst business school searches have reduced by minus 53%. So again, this is an indication of inherent pent-up demand globally. And again, the very fact that it got funded, it raised about $100 million, also gives an indication, a proxy indication of where the education revolution is moving on. So it is no more like, I think someone previously he said it very well, that the power has moved from the teachers to the students, right? So there's a whole power shift thanks to technology. And I think that could be very, very, if used well, very, very useful for the student community. And again, the question is, who is a teacher? So of course you have the traditional group of teachers who are qualified, B.Ed. At the same time, you have corporate teachers. At the same time, you have peer-to-peer learning where students themselves can be teachers. And then you also have celebrities who use platforms like Masterclass to teach and share their experience. I myself did a short course on leadership on this platform recently, and what I loved is I could learn from very well-known leaders globally who run Fortune 500 companies through literally 6-minute videos during my transit period to work. So very, very different experience than sitting in a classroom with a fixed curriculum, with exams, one that has to give. So the whole model of education is shifting, and we have to be cognizant of this. But of course, in this whole COVID world, as the phenomena of Zoom school started, obviously, as the New Yorker wrote, that this is the whole Zoom school experiment, and we also have to be very realistic that that this is not going to be very, very easy. Zoom fatigue is real. National Geographic did a study, and they realized that whilst there are a lot of challenges as we kind of go into this pure online schooling, like with most things in digital, starting this is easy, but sustaining this, especially for the entire classroom, some of you asked the question that what do you do for backbenchers, so to speak? What do you do for people who can't keep up pace? What if they don't have the right bandwidth or the right set of devices? So affordability, accessibility is still a challenge. Even the psychology of learning in a digital classroom is not easy, because suddenly you don't have access to body language. So your mind is unable to really understand the teacher's body language or the body language of peers. Teachers are facing a problem where children have become very smart, and they can mute and they can shut down videos, or they create breakout rooms on Zoom channels or private WhatsApp groups to chit chat. So this is, again, as we look at the benefits of e-learning and edtech, we also have to be cognizant that there are a lot of challenges that we're going to face before we get to a stable environment. And I thought this cartoon from Market Earnest kind of really captures the challenge of higher education today. Is essentially, it's comparing to, a shoe brand where, on a typical shoe brand, you order online and, it says, we have received your non-refundable deposit. But by the way, your shoes are now online only. You're not going to get your physical shoes. It's only going to be a virtual shoe. Same way, education, which was all about the reason Harvard charges that premium, or IIM or IIT charges that premium. A, they believe in that elitist model of exclusivity. B, it is also about the whole classroom experience, the experience of staying on campus, networking with the right, the rich and the famous. So there are so many things bundled in the education. So they were not charging the premium just for the class notes and the teacher's time or the education itself. They were charging for a whole different experience. But this current crisis has literally cut that experience off. And suddenly, universities which were originally set up by non-profits, as Scott Galloway says, they're not really non-profits anymore, but they are the highest gross margin brands in the world. But suddenly, without the in-classroom and on-campus experience, suddenly that perceived value is likely to be diminished, and hence that initial chart that I showed you. So hopefully we kind of get a good grasp of where education is today. How has it changed in the last 15, 20 years, where the power is shifting to the people, thankfully, where people are questioning the elitist nature of education institutes, where people want to solve for the higher good, for the noble purpose of education, to make it affordable and accessible. So that's the core challenge. And the current crisis and the edtech industry is only accelerating this. So let's take a look at what do we mean by edtech? How do we classify it? How large is it? What are some challenges? All right. So let's quickly take a look at the edtech landscape and the market size. Now, I must quickly classify that edtech is way larger and complex than just the Coursera's and Udemy's and Udacity's, Byju's and Masterclass. Those are obviously the very well-funded unicorns or near unicorn companies that we see as consumers. But behind that, there is a whole host of classification of different kind of services. So here is a periodic table chart which talks about various B2B and B2C models which power edtech. So you have knowledge and content, you have education management, you of course have the traditional schools and colleges, you have to look at the new delivery models in which boot camps and MOOC, the massively online learning curriculums, which are obviously very famous, experiential learning, which leverage robotics, augmented reality and virtual reality, international education, learning, language learning, various note-taking, tutoring systems, test prep, which is so popular in India. assessment and verification systems, where blockchain is playing a massive role, workforce and talent management, and also skills and jobs, which is all about, lifelong learning education. So I think what is very important is to be cognizant that this is a massive industry and there are various parallel, not really about those large few B2C, K-12 education platforms. We're looking at various other categorizations. I think that's very, very important. But if you quickly look at the basic categorization, you would notice, this is from CB Insights, these are the basic 7 or 8 categorizations of which preschool and K-12 look at the major categorizations. And K-12 obviously in the Indian or Asian context is class 1 to 12. So if you look at it, there is broad online learning, there is career development, you have learning management systems, you have classroom education, preschool. In fact, preschool is getting a lot of attention, rightfully so. Language learning, test prep, which is so big and important in India, companies like Topper, etc. So I think these are, primarily the B2C segments. I think are very, very important. Also, I think I wanted to highlight the importance of post-university continuous learning, because again, this is something that doesn't get enough attention, but it's important because I think in our traditional Asian systems, we only think of education beginning at nursery, upper KG, class 1, and finishing at college. But I think the reality, as we realize, with lifelong learning, education probably begins just when you graduate from college. So I think courses offered through corporate degrees, through lifelong learning courses, and not just again the typical education. It could also be in sports and music. It could be in soft skills. So the whole gamut of education is expanding. So I think we got to be mindful of the classification of education. But let's quickly look at the market size. How big is this edtech world? What are some challenges? Where are the investments coming from? And then we'll look at the trends, as I assured you. So firstly, I think in the what's expected is we expect there to be a massive improvement in education base. So of course, the good news is the global literacy rates have drastically improved in the last 20, 30 years. And I think what we expect based on some of these studies is in the next 15 years, by 2030, we expect a massive rise in the secondary and post-secondary education base globally. And I think what the good news is that there's going to be a decrease in people without education. So I think that's an overall good news. And I think a lot of this has to do with edtech. So I think, like I said, education can't remain an elitist, non-accessible phenomena. We got to ensure as education practitioners that we got to make education accessible and solve for the global problem. Of course, as we look at the global market, it's likely to be a $10 trillion market. And this is over the next 10, 15 years, the whole, expenditure in global education and training is likely to increase, from about 6 trillion to about 10 trillion. So massive base. And if you look at the pie chart, about 55% of it is likely to be in the K-12. Because again, if you look at bulk of the world is still very much, we are still focused on solving for primary and secondary education. So if you look at investments, very likely it's going to be in K-12 as well as post-secondary schooling. Of course, there are smaller segments of investments likely to happen in corporate as well as lifelong learning, but bulk of it will still be in the school system. And if you look at the, like I said, the education industry, which is moving from, likely to move from about 6 trillion to 10 trillion, that's where the trajectory is. And I think COVID's only going to accelerate this. And again, like I said, if we zoom in, the opportunity is we are likely to have about 350 million more secondary and 150 million more post-secondary students literally in the next 4 to 5 years. So there's a massive opportunity, and I'm genuinely hoping that technology, policies, people, processes, and investments all work towards this. But if I look at the current scenario, the bad news is that currently it's education is starved of capital and digitization in relative terms to other industries. So I think a lot more capital needs to flow in, both from private as well as public sector, as well as the non-profit sector. And apart from capital moving, what the need of the hour is digitization. If you look at globally, even with all this news of edtech, only less than 3% is digitized. We are still very much a old school traditional industry. And I'm not saying that online learning is the solution. We need to figure out interesting hybrid models, but the delivery or the content production or the delivery or the certification process or the all those classifications that I showed you in the periodic chart, we have to have digitization. And digitization is expected to double by 2025. So from 2.6% of digital spend, it is likely to closer to get to about 5%. So about $342 billion is expected globally to be invested within the edtech phenomena. And I think that's the good news, because we are still massively underfunded and under-digitized. And if I look at it, the good news again is that, like I said, today education is very much a private sector game. So I guess from one lens, the good news is the venture capital funds, VC funds, they are pumping in a lot of money. So they are likely to pump in close to about $8 billion in the education space, which is likely to massively boost the domain of edtech, which can serve people, especially in the emerging markets. And I'll take you through that shortly. But I think the worry that I have is that I think if public funding goes below or goes lower and lower, that may not augur very well for the larger population. So we need to match funding. It should be a public-private partnership model. Apart from VC funding coming in, we need multilateral banks like World Bank, ADB, etc., as well as governments. We need them to kind of come in as well. And like I said, bulk of the VC funding in the edtech domain is flowing to China, US, and India. So of course, in India, we keep hearing about the Baiju phenomena, Udacity, etc. But we also need to be cognizant. China is way ahead of the game in most things today, including education. So their edtech, both in terms of hardware and software solutions, as we see, in terms of money flowing in, both in terms of R&D and as well as accessibility. China, if I look at 2018 numbers, it's more than 5 to 6 times. So India is doing well, but a lot to catch up. Now let's quickly look at where does India and ASEAN, and ASEAN stands for Southeast Asia, which collectively I think someone else started sharing the screen. I will try and share my screen once again. Yeah, so it's talking about, hopefully I'm visible. I'll talk about India and ASEAN as well, because that's a market where bulk of our audience today come from. And if I look at that, if I look at the India education space, again, it's very much a B2C game, where I think bulk of the names or bulk of the activity that we typically hear about is from the Baijus, Vedantu, Doubtnet, White Hat, Junior, Blackboard Radio, so on and so forth. But I think what's also important that I'm very happy to see is a development in the education finance, because someone has to be able to provide financing for education. Test prep, I think Topper, Testbook, they've done a great job. We're also seeing great activity happening in the apps and games for kids, Play Shifu, Nutter, Nai Disha. I think these are all great developments, because we want to bring in exciting research and exciting learnings through gamifications for cognitive development. So this is broadly the landscape, which is primarily B2C, but also some B2B elements in finance and learning management systems that's happening in the Indian edtech phenomena. Funding, I think it's obviously in the last 2-3 years, 2018 was a marquee year. I think we've had some great deals that are happening. What is very encouraging is a lot of the deals are early stage. So if you look at the stacked bar chart, a lot of the deals are in the seed and angel, early stage deals, which means a lot of young and new companies are coming forward, and a lot of investments are happening in that domain. So that's very good. Of course, this year is going to be a difficult one, but I suspect and I hope that the funding phenomena will continue, both from local as well as foreign venture capitalists. And if you look at who is being funded, of course, Baijus is an outlier, with massive funding that they have received, especially from the Zuckerberg Foundation and other VCs. You look at the gap there, right? So Baijus is literally disproportionately funded, followed by Udacity, Incred, etc. But again, to me, it's only the beginning of this revolution. I think in the coming 4 to 5 years, we'll have many more. But I think with this queued, what's likely to happen is you're likely to see a lot more acquisitions and consolidations that's likely to happen from Byju's and Udacity as they try to consolidate their position. In fact, literally 2 weeks ago, Byju's spent more than $450 million acquiring two local tier 2 companies, White Hat Junior for $300 million, as well as it also acquired Doubtnut for about $100 to $150 million. So it's unprecedented in the Indian ecosystem for such large, massive deals to happen in any sector, let alone in the education field. So clearly, the very fact that this amount of money that's been flowing in, as well as the kind of activity that we are seeing across the different avenues in the education space, I think these are good signs for the Indian edtech phenomenon. But I think, the point that I want to bring out is, it's always heartening to see the investments in any field, especially in an emerging market like India. But I think the concern, for the Indian education system is well documented, is in the employability of people. So this was done by Data Labs. And as you notice, the study shows the different skill sets and degrees over the years, the employability is below 50%. Essentially, again, there's a disconnect between students that are coming out and their employability and what the industry is saying. So again, there has to be, and very likely there will be, joint activity between the industry and the education system to try and ensure that there is better employability, both at a professional service as well as at a vocational level, to ensure that education is, not just an academic exercise, but hopefully it leads to better outcomes in the industry, better productivity, because globally India's productivity levels are amongst the lowest in the world, unfortunately. And this is where we need to figure out how not just to educate a larger volume, but also how do we kind of scale this up? And again, the gender disparity also has to be kind of taken care as well. And if I look at the phenomena, the education. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sorry. There is just give me one moment. I just need to check my Wi-Fi network. Just give me 1 minute. Hi, is the screen visible?
Yeah.
All right. A bit of connection challenge. Yeah. So yeah, talking about the Indian market, like I said, it's heartening to see that, but I think the skill and the employability gap is a concern. But with this mapping, as you see, I think the top right, the necessary part, I think where the market strength and the industry adoption is the highest is in test prep, is in tutoring, is in language learning, LMS, gamified learning, and that's understandable. I think given where India is at a macro level, it's only as a very young country with a median age of 28, 29, it's very likely that it's that K-12 population that is likely to adopt, especially in tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 cities where perhaps many of them are experiencing such formal education for the first time. It's very likely that they are likely to kind of adopt, edtech more than other groups. If you look at the blue category of transitory, I think that's where industry adoption is high, but our market strength isn't that great. But that's again an area which hopefully will improve in the coming years. Experimental areas, I think, there's a lot of talk about classroom tech, AI, VR, etc. I think that's a bit more futuristic for India. I think the need of the hour right now is to solve for, how do we ensure that our preschool K-12 students, our college students, they have good access. They have good access to quality material. as well as a pedagogy and a learning process that helps them become employable. And hopefully this pattern also, my hope is for India that this pattern also gets taken ahead by corporates, because like I said, education, one unfortunate general flaw in our system has been that obviously it's been rote learning based. It's been very much driven about let's finish our education at college and then life is set. But I think as we have realized, pace of change, every few years curriculum is changing, the requirement of the industry is changing. So we can't be, college education is not necessarily a guaranteed prerequisite or a visa to success. There has to be continuous, constant learning opportunities available. And I want to spend 5 minutes on ASEAN, Southeast Asia, which collectively is, I think, the 6th largest economy in the world. So ASEAN essentially is a set of 10 countries, of which Singapore, Indonesia, Philippines, Vietnam, Brunei, Thailand, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos are a part of. This is again a very unique field. I've done my college, my high school in Indonesia. I did my primary school and early high school in Pune, in St. Vincent's. After that, I did my high schooling in Indonesia and Jakarta, and then I came and did my college degree in NUS in Singapore. So having experienced India and Southeast Asia, I think Southeast Asia is a very interesting and unique market. And the development that I'm seeing here is that I think Indonesia is probably quite similar to the Indian market, but I think Singapore, again, being a developed country and a slightly, quite different, I suppose, from many of the emerging markets, the development is a bit different. I think the focus that I'm seeing is in continuous learning, in education financing, in corporate micro learning, which is, again, I'm seeing similar patterns in Western Europe as well as Scandinavia as well. And again, I think what I'm seeing here is a lot of focus on skills and jobs. So technologies which are kind of helping companies and their employees stay employable, stay updated through micro learning. So, gone are the days where companies are okay sending their people for 3 to 5 days of training per month. You probably have a online learning management system or a mobile app which is feeding you education drip by drip, right? So it's a very a system that's built through behavioral economics, a field that really excites me. You're also looking at technologies that are looking at funding education. You're looking at verification. I think that's a field where I'm seeing a lot of movement in Singapore, where using blockchain, the whole certification process is becoming digitized, so that not only is it easy, is it cheaper, it's accessible, also trust. Because all of us have faced this issue that when we lose a certificate, you have to go to the university. It's a long drawn process to get that certification. But today, if the certification is on the cloud, thanks to blockchain, you can verify the trust. It's accessible. Your corporate employees can quickly verify it. So, it's slightly more enterprise driven edtech model in Southeast Asia. And if you look at the funding, again, there's been a good amount of funding. Again, it's not comparable to India. India, I think, like I said, thanks to Byju's and Udacity, the funding is far larger. But in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Singapore, we are seeing a handful of companies that are trying to scale edtech in a very localized manner. So I think this is a space to watch out for in Southeast Asia. So I think like I saw, bulk of the VC investments is going to China. I think China is clearly an outlier in most things. I know, with the current ongoing China-India tensions, I mean, there's a lot of chest thumping and a lot of national pride. And I obviously want to take that national pride, but in the right spirit, that I think we need to look inwards and we need to develop and we need to come up with our own homogeneous national solutions. But I must at the same time be realistic and admit that we are still far behind. So I think this is a very good opportunity for the Indian ecosystem as well as the Southeast Asian ecosystem. Now, let me quickly summarize some of the trends that I foresee that will accelerate the whole transformation of the education field before I end, and I'm happy to take some questions. So at a macro level, there are a few global trends that are coming up. And so there are certain countries, certain spaces that will remain education as usual, where a lot of countries may still be in denial, or they may not have the right set of people or policies or investments. But there is also a regional rising phenomena that where there are alliances between different countries, where there's a lot more collaboration that's happening between countries, between governments and the private sector. You're also seeing the emergence of global giants. So you suddenly look at very large tech companies like Microsoft, Apple, Facebook, etc. Everyone's getting into education. We recently read about how Facebook has started its education program in India. So it's not education, again, like I said, is no more the domain of just the government or just a few rich families or a few non-profits. In fact, out of these 5 trends, if there is one trend that I really feel that it's emerging very strongly, it's the likelihood that these big tech companies are going to enter education in a very, very rapid way. The way Reliance is going with 14 deals in 14 weeks with $20 billion in its pocket, I wouldn't be surprised that they would also look at digitizing the whole phenomena of education beyond their current interests in entertainment, retail, so on and so forth. Peer-to-peer, I think this is a very interesting one, where using blockchain and using other technologies, you will suddenly see the rise of these niche players. And I'm seeing this in Singapore and US. Like, for example, in the field of digital marketing consulting where I operate, even in a mature country like Singapore, there are very, very few courses that produce industry-grade digital marketers. So even the top universities in Singapore, unfortunately, don't have very established digital marketing courses. That's simply because the field is emerging so quickly. The curriculum and the pedagogy and the teachers can't keep pace. So what's happening is there are private sector companies, there are individual gurus who are creating very, very interesting peer-to-peer education models. Globally, for example, in the domain of marketing, you have a gentleman like Seth Godin. Like, he is considered to be, his Alt MBA program is considered to be one of the most cost-effective, yet one of the best programs that globally people can access who want to be in the field of business and management. So I think we have to reimagine education beyond the realms of campus life and just one-way student-teacher interaction. I think those days are limited, if not gone. And the other, of course, a bit futuristic is the robo revolution, where literal physical robots, augmented reality, virtual reality. I think Microsoft is doing a great job where they're trying to bring in Microsoft, Google using their lens technology, hologram technology. You could literally have holograms of teachers in a physical setup, or you could obviously have very sophisticated visual devices to kind of make the education process very interactive through augmented reality and virtual reality. So these are some broad parameters that I see. But if we zoom in, I think we need to see progress, and what's likely to where we like to see progress is in these 8 areas, and we need to solve for these 8 themes. Is how can we use technology to better connect students with administrators, students with teachers, so on and so forth. Credentials, I think the whole verifications of credentials. I think we're also moving away from that era where the paper degree matters a lot. I think a lot of times the reason education has remained elitist is because of that paper degree. But like I said, there are various markets today, they don't value that paper degree. I think we need to solve for knowledge, we need to solve for curiosity, we need to solve for pedagogy. So it's not that paper degree that needs to be chased after. Advancement in technology. Experience is a huge one. I think today what the current online education platforms don't really necessarily solve for is very good experience. Like I said, I have been observing the Zoom classrooms. They're a good start, but I don't think they're necessarily the very sustainable or very good experiences. So my bet is that companies that provide seamless and very interactive experiences, they will be able to charge higher premiums. They will be able to build better brands. We also need technology to help us discover. Today, for example, a lot of people come to me in my field and say, oh, you know what, I want to get into digital marketing. Which courses should I study? And earlier I used to find it very strange, but today I realize, in our olden system, there was no choice. You finish in class 8 to 12, you study physics, chemistry, maths, bio. It was all prescribed. You knew there was one path or 2 paths at most. After that, either you go, engineering, medicine, law, that's it. But today the choices are immense. So how do you ensure, how do you help people discover the right courses? And I think the MOOCs, some of the larger American universities, they're doing a great job to make their content and their courses discoverable. Creation and co-creation of content, I think that's going to be a massive. So what format do you create? Was it only, I always question, why does every presentation or every class need to be PowerPoint? Why can't it be just visual? Why not podcast? And do we need to create a system where it's a mix of a hybrid of physical and online, where pre-class there needs to be certain reading, Maybe in class, it's only experiential. Maybe we need to create an environment where people can create or discuss or debate. And then post class, there are some follow-up reading or video consumption. So that whole customer journey has to be really reimagined. Our old school classroom system of sitting in and listening one way, that is very, very hard to sustain. And I don't think that's going to cut out, especially if you want to solve for the industry. And of course, you need technology to manage the whole administrative purpose, the finance elements of education. So I think these are 8 areas that we will see a lot of progress and a lot of investment coming in. Let me talk about, at the end, 3 specific trends that I see that are likely to be accelerated. The first one is, like I was telling you at the beginning, education, especially the campus education at the biggest of universities, was not really about just education. It was really the bundling of a lot of things. It was bundling of sports, bundling of co-living, bundling of dating, because in college is typically a space where people interact and they meet their future partners, alumni networks, credentials. So as you see in the tweet that this gentleman who is one of the pioneers, Eric, he's pioneering the whole niche learning, distant learning phenomena. He's put a wonderful thought piece out there saying that education will be unbundled. So whatever colleges provided today, technology companies are going to break it into small pieces and build businesses around it. So that's this whole unbundling of education by niche technology companies is going to be a massive phenomenon. So if Harvard was able to command premiums of that $50,000 or $100,000, of course, I think very likely some of the top tier schools are likely to remain, still remain for a long time, given their brand and given the money and the war chest that they have. But the middle layer is what I fear, because if they're offering Me Too products, very, very hard to sustain. So very soon you might see that a company provides summer camps and boot camps, a very niche product. Maybe sports and co-living will have a completely different startup ecosystem. So suddenly what education institutes and universities provided, you will see those to be broken down. So this whole balkanization of education is very, very likely. So that's a big trend that I foresee already happening, and COVID's just going to accelerate that. Of course, as Scott Galloway has already spoken about this phenomena, you are likely to see big tech, and by big tech I'm referring to Amazon, Facebook, Google, Reliance in India, Alibaba, Tencent in China. Them combining forces with big education players like Harvard, Yale, in India could be the IIT, IIMs, ISBs, and big corporate. Very likely these big boys are going to combine forces, which is likely to result in unfortunate deaths of certain small-scale, mid-scale universities who may not be able to compete. Because the moment these two out of these 3 players come together with their budgets, their investments, their capabilities and capacities, they are able to potentially combine forces and create omni-channel, mobile-driven, accessible education programs. So suddenly, you might find that the Harvards and the Yales of the world might flip their business model and say, where they were originally elitist programs only admitting, a few hundred students out of lakhs of students, they might say, hey, why don't we play the volume game and make education accessible? Again, right? This is, I'm just my postulation for the future. But if I'm certain of one thing, that big education or the big tech is, because today they own us, they can access us through mobile devices. So they have access to potentially, 5 billion odd people. So they are likely to partner with content creators. It could be the Harvards of the world, or it could be other content creators, peer-to-peer networks, and they could really change the game for education. Likewise, corporates. I really foresee, Infosys started with the Mysore corporate campus because they realized that unfortunately the universities were not producing the kind of candidates that they wanted. So they took matters in their own hand. I just think that that's going to only get accelerated. Either they will start creating their own campuses, but more likely they're likely to partner with the Coursera's, Udacity's, Byju's, etc. to leverage their technology and their systems and pedagogies to create lifelong learning opportunities. And they may even be offered as benefits to corporate employees going forward. Lastly, I think immersive technology. It's a bit more futuristic, but I think, especially with big tech coming in, it's only a matter of time that augmented reality and then virtual reality, followed by artificial intelligence in terms of, measurement, in terms of benchmarking, in terms of content discovery. Like I talked about blockchain, especially in verification of results and certifications, is already a reality. So these 4 technologies where investment is increasing on a year-by-year basis. I think this is going to be used. And again, I think what's important is not to use technology for the sake of technology, but to solve for specific problems. Those 8 squares that I spoke about: discovery, experience, accessibility, affordability, so on and so forth. And lastly, I think what's important is, I think someone earlier spoke about SWAYAM, and I think I've taken this from the Ken. I think they've done this very well. I think, in many industries, what I've, as in my digital consulting career, I think there's always the temptation to kind of jump on the technology bandwagon because it's cool. But I think, we need to realize that, especially in education and healthcare also, these are fields where we have the potential to change the lives of people and their livelihoods going forward, right? So I think what's important is we need to solve for accessibility, affordability, as well as adoption. And for adoption to increase, what's important is not just investment in technology, infrastructure, and change in policies, but also in process, in upskilling the stakeholders. How do we ensure that today's teachers and the future teachers are well trained, that they have access to the right hardware and software, that they can collaborate with their peers? And then what's the right model what in terms of financing? What's the right model in terms of tech accessibility? What's the right model in terms of pedagogy? What's the right model which creates the best student-teacher ratio and experience? Because we want to ensure that ultimately all this edtech leads to better experience and better adoption. So that, what is the end goal? The end goal is so that hopefully people, we are creating a generation that is not just educated today, but also has the capacity to be curious, so that they can continue the learning process in the industry or in academia. And hopefully they are out there to solve larger industry problems. So I think it's important to keep an eye on the bigger picture, that and not get baffled and not just get enamored by all the funding in EdTech and all the activity that's happening. I think the outcome matters more than the output. So we need to keep our focus on the larger outcome of creating a society that is literate, creating a society that is employable, which leads to upward mobility in society, and also people, human beings who invest in R&D, who are curious to constantly invest in knowledge. I think if we can create that virtuous cycle, I think that's the future that we need to look out for. So at the end, what I would really say is, COVID is kind of accelerating what began 15, 20 years ago. And I think as members of this industry and academia, it's important that we adapt and embrace this wholeheartedly, and we kind of go along this accelerating journey, because with the goal is to equalize. The goal is to ensure that education is accessible and affordable. And I think we're on that trajectory. And I think it's important that, as participants or stakeholders in this industry, we adapt and embrace this trend wholeheartedly and do our best to kind of level the playing field for everyone on this planet. Thank you. That's all from my side. Happy to take questions if we still have time.
I would request the participants to please unmute yourself and put forward your queries if you have any.
Prantik, can we see you during the QA session?
Sure, let me just try. Just hope the video holds up. Let me try.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just try and hold on. I'll try and join on my mobile. I think the video might just work out there. So
that's okay, Prantik. I mean, that's okay. Participants, questions to Prantik, please.
Yeah, good afternoon,
Hello,
Mr.
sir.
Prantik. It was really... Hello?
yeah, yes, hi.
May I ask a question? I'm Chetan.
Hi, Chetan. Hi.
Yeah, thanks a lot for such a enlightening session. Well, what I feel, country like India, where each state, what yesterday one of the speaker has said, each state is equal to some other country. This kind of uniform, transit to the technology may not be possible so fast. So what do you suggest for that?
True. I think, anything in India, obviously, as they say, right, India is probably a few hundred countries put together. So I think it's true. I think given our overall economic scenario, given how heterogeneous our population is, how perhaps inaccessible a lot of our cities and towns may be, those challenges exist. But if I look at, how well India has done in terms of mobile penetration, how well India is doing on, fintech adoption, I think I'm quite hopeful that I think, if anything, it's only technology that will help, make things accessible, be it financial services, being healthcare or education. So yes, it will be. It's obviously a challenge, but I think if I look at the signs from other industries when it comes to social media, entertainment, you look at what Hotstar has done, what Netflix and Amazon are doing, right? So if that adoption can happen at a tech level, in those fields, look at what's happening with Paytm and other fintech products, right? I just think it's a question of us needing a trigger point, and I dare say, in a very weird way, that COVID is that trigger point, that point of inflection. Of course, it has to be supported with policy. It has to be supported with better financing. But I'm quite bullish that, if anything, it is technology that's going to be an equalizer, that is going to ensure, because what is the flip opportunity? Nothing, right? Otherwise, if assuming technology was not there, we would have had to wait for decades before before schools and good schools and good teachers would be accessible to people in our villages and people in our towns. You look at TikTok, right? Of course, there's a lot of controversy around it, but if I look at the learning from that, in less than a year, about obviously by now it's known that India had about 200 million active monthly TikTok users. India had about 1.2 million active TikTok creators, content creators who came from tier 3, tier 4 cities or towns. So to me, if I take the learnings, if I keep the emotions, nationalistic emotions aside and look at the learnings, if a platform like TikTok could be adopted that quickly, to me, that's a sign that if we make education fun, accessible, if we break it into micro learning, I think there is hope. Otherwise, there is no reason why a Paytm, even when Paytm came, everyone said, oh, who's going to use it? It's going to be so difficult. Will they pay for it? But I think that's the beauty. The beauty of young India is, I think, we got to give them a chance. We got to give them a chance to be upwardly mobile. We got to give them a chance, an opportunity to access this. And I think the key is for us as in the education institutions, the policy makers, the curriculum makers, for us to change. I think if we are rigid, if we keep thinking of education the way we have thought of it in the last 100 years, obviously that will not change. So I think any change is always difficult, but I think technology will accelerate the change, and it is what's going to give us the chance to make things easier and make things equitable for a lot of people. So absolutely difficult. Anything in India is always going to be a challenge, but I think we're on the right path.
Yeah. Thank you for enlightening. I have a few more questions. I will ping you personally. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Chetan.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, I'm Pooja Mangal from MCA student from SIOM. Sir, as you said, it was not the case for older generations to access education easy as of today, like as we are accessing today. So, my simple question is, are we going to see a lot of career jumps in future because of pandemic? I guess a lot of professions will be vanished in coming years as there will be a new normal.
So, again, like I said, the pandemic is only likely to accelerate the change. I think that the change that you're talking about of career jumps, that is happening anyway. I think, and I think that's a positive light, right? Compared to the time when I graduated in 2001 and today, I think today we have 50 more new careers. I mean, there are careers in RJ, DJing, there are careers in ethnography, there are careers in mountaineering, so on and so forth, right? So I think it's true. I think we're not going to be in an era where we're going to have only one or two jobs. Hopefully more and more people pursue their dreams and passions and try and figure out how to monetize that. So hopefully we're no more going to be in the era of only engineering, medicine, law, chartered accountancy. I think that was a good phase. I think that helped us in a particular way. So we're definitely going to see a lot more people venture out, the younger folks, to try out different careers, to try out different models. We are also seeing a lot more young Indians venture into entrepreneurship, trying to build their careers as freelancers or creating small companies. So, COVID, no COVID, I think that's going to be the case anyway. And I think that's quite an exciting for young India coming up in the next 10, 20 years.
Yes, sir. So thank you for answering.
Thanks, Pooja.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, Prantik, just wanted to understand, you were saying that even the premium universities or, the elitist of the organizations, because they have to, they are not on campus. So the students are putting in that why do we give so much of fees and all, which is leading to a financial instability being brought into these premier institutions or whichever of any tier. But once we transition online for a certain period of time or go for a blended mode, so don't you think that the accessibility, the availability, the reach increases, and we are not constrained to the only physical infrastructure, we are not constrained to the physical resources, we can use people from across the globe, the best of the faculty, we can impart education 24/7, we can make that type of education accessible to students, give them the degrees, and this can, even if the cost goes down based on the number of students, it can be almost equated to the same normal which was being there, the financial normal which was there till date 3-4 months before.
Yeah, so like I said, in fact, I think my hope is that education, like I said, the best of education, the best of professors, the best of classroom, whether it's a hybrid model or whatever the best options available, I hope that in the next 50 years as we grow as a society, I don't think knowledge should be inaccessible. I think that's my core philosophy. So if assuming Harvard is considered to be the best in a particular domain, if IIT, IIMs, ISBs or any other institutes are considered to be in a particular domain, I think that has to be accessible. Now, the funding model, again, there can be various models. Like, again, the whole debate of that very first slide that I shared is why can't we have, a subscription model to a Harvard education or any college education at 1,000 rupees, right?
Correct.
So, and I genuinely think we are moving in that direction. It's going to take a while because those institutions have a legacy. They have policies of they are run by non-profits. They have massive hundreds of billions of dollars in their war chest. So I think the time has come. This whole phenomena is going to accelerate and push them to think that, hey, it's time to change. We can't be seen as luxury brands anymore. We might have to become mass accessible brands. And you're right, they can still eventually earn the same money because they might be playing a volume game, or they could be partnering with big companies and saying, what, you have 100,000 employees, pay me $10 per month per employee, and they might be able to in fact make more money. So yes, I think for the education institutes, as long as they are willing to be nimble and willing to change, I think the revenue models could be even better, and we might yet be solving for accessibility. So I think we could potentially solve for both money as well as affordability.
Thank you so much.
Sir, I would like. May I ask a question based on this answer? I am Chetan once again.
Sure, Chetan. Hi.
Yeah. So when you have said that for the masses. Now, when we talk about few area of expertise, it is mostly for classes and may not be for masses. And the exclusivity for classes itself make it different from others. And that is what is the identity for few of those institutes. Do you think in long run they will really transit to the education for masses?
Now, again, I can't speak for them, what the Harvards and the elitist institutions will do. But all I can see is that I typically believe that change happens ground up. So I don't know if typically if you look at most industries, change doesn't happen from the legacy companies, right? So I don't foresee them changing upfront. But what I foresee is a lot of the edtech startups, a lot of the Byju's, the Udacities, the Coursera's, either solo or in partnership with large corporations or the big tech. Like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if tomorrow you have Amazon University and Facebook University set up, which provides hybrid models. Because, I mean, not only do they have massive funding, thanks to public markets, but they have the technology which the likes of the education institutes don't have. So to me, the place that I foresee massive disruption coming from is either the new age startups or the big tech companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon, in partnership with the likes of Reliance, because they have the amalgamation of technology and resources. So, and I think they will push the elitist old school institutions to be forced to be. I fear they may not have much of a choice. Again, it's not going to happen in a year or two, but I think in a decade or so, things could look very, very different for a lot of universities. And I suspect the change is likely to happen bottom up. That's my gut feeling.
Good evening, sir.
Hello.
Thanks a lot. Hello.
I'd like to supplement what you said. I'm Professor Mangesh Sana from Siagat Institutes. Hello.
Hello. Yes, sir.
You're talking about democratization of education, and on the contrary, as a columnist, you talk about a revenue model being developed like the subscription model. But for a continental country like India, you yourselves referred, is as good as some 100 countries in the world. Like the Company Act makes 2% of the profit to be spent compulsorily for public good. So at a national level, if the government of India comes out with a regulation that the premier educational institutes in the country, if they want to survive as private institutes and continue with the revenue model, why don't they contribute to a national channel which is set up for higher and technical education? I'd like to know your views on this.
Prantik, can you just one sec before you answer? Can you just come out of WhatsApp because it is being shown on the screen? Thank you so much.
Not my. Okay. I think there was some issue with that screen. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yes. So I think that's a very good point. I think so. Like I said, I don't think it'll be a one size fit all for for all of India or for all companies. I think that's the beauty or power of technology and digital, that it is likely to be, you're going to have different solutions for different types of problems. So I think, yes, it's possible that there could be a subscription model that comes up for certain segments. Like I said, the whole Indian education landscape, there are various segments. You have the K-12s, you have the corporate learning, so on and so forth. So given the different segments, you might find the subscription model prevail in certain cases. You might find that if a lot of non-profit entities enter the education space, they might have a different model. If the corporates come in, maybe there's a policy which kind of encourages them to use that 2% of their revenue or profits to kind of drive this change. So I don't think it's going to be one uniform thing, to be honest. But at the same time, I personally don't think it's contradictory, because I think the different models that we see in the digital economy today, be it subscription, be it advertisement, maybe there's an advertisement-based model out there. But I think in general, for example, if you look at a masterclass like model, it's a freemium subscription model. And I with the massive growth that they're going through, very likely similar models in India could run. Now, of course, in terms of access, to make that accessible, yes, I think that's a very good point. And I think that's where, like I said, I think in my initial slides, I spoke about the fact that, that it's important for this, especially education, for not to be just a pure, private sector game. It is important for it to be a public-private partnership. And that's where the governments, the Ministry of Education, etc., need to be involved to shape policy in that way, because otherwise you're right that if it's purely in the private sector domain, it's going to be driven by profitability, which then suddenly makes accessibility a big issue. But again, even if it's, for example, even let's assume it's only a private sector game. My gut feeling is that is still likely to be a better model than the current scenario where education is not accessible at all. I mean, even if it's a freemium model where saying, there's a base level that's available for free, but beyond this, you need to pay whatever that is, 1,000 rupees a month or 5,000 rupees a month, which could obviously be very difficult for a lot of people in India, for example. I'm just saying that is still one step better than not having the connections, not having the wherewithal to kind of access, not knowing which college to go to, not having that guidance. So I just think it's going to be a step-by-step change, and I totally agree with you that it should be a public-private model as opposed to a pure private sector profitability-driven model.
That was a very informative session, sir, and even more insightful question and answers. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So, with that, we come to the end of our day 2 of this international webinar. We are getting to know so much about the needs, requirements, changes, challenges, and the behavior in technology and education that this COVID-19 has forced us to acknowledge. But let's stay hopeful and see the silver lining in the cloud as how our education system could transform and the technical and online transition of the world. With that, I'd close today's sessions. Once again, I would like to thank Director SIOM, Savitribai Phule Pune University, Faculty of Commerce and Management, Xavier's Institute of Social Service, Ranchi, Corporate Gurukul, Singapore, Happy Marketers, Singapore, and BPB Publications, Pune Business School. Also, all the participants for joining in. Thank you all. See you tomorrow at 9 a.m. for our day 3. Thanks.